Have you ever noticed that almost everyone is terrified of being alone? Not lonely, terrified. There's a difference. Loneliness is something that happens to you. This terror is something people organize their entire lives around avoiding. They accept relationships that stopped working years ago. They stay in beds next to people they've grown to resent. They have conversations that mean nothing, make promises they've already broken internally, perform intimacy with someone who has become, over years of slow erosion, a complete stranger. All of it, rather than sit alone in a quiet room with their own thoughts. Ask yourself honestly what that says about what those thoughts contain. Since childhood, the same idea gets installed in every person with the consistency of a biological drive. There is someone made for you, someone who will arrive and make the incompleteness stop, someone who will take the unnamed weight you've been carrying and make it mean something, someone who will finally justify your existence by choosing it. And this is one of the most destructive ideas ever planted in a human mind. Because while you believe you need someone to be whole, you are permanently available for exploitation. You will accept less than you deserve because less is better than nothing. You will reshape yourself into whatever the other person seems to need because losing them feels like losing the only thing standing between you and the void. You will call this love. It is not love. It is the managed terror of someone who has never learned to be alone. There are people who have been married for 20 years who are more profoundly alone than a man sitting at a bar at 2 a.m. staring at nothing. And at least the man at the bar knows where he is, while the married person has built an entire life, an entire identity, an entire social presentation around a relationship that emptied out years ago and never got replaced with anything real. They sleep next to someone, they share a mortgage, a last name, Christmas photos that perform happiness so thoroughly that even they sometimes almost believe it. They have built a life that looks from the outside exactly like the destination everyone is supposed to be aiming for. And inside, they are completely, structurally, unreachably alone. And this is more common than anyone will admit in public, not as an edge case, but as the dominant experience of committed relationships. Two people who once felt something real, who then watched it slowly drain out through years of routine and disappointment and the gradual revelation of who the other person actually is versus who they needed them to be, who stayed anyway because leaving meant starting over, meant facing what they'd been using the relationship to avoid, meant sitting alone in a room with the question of who they actually are when they're not performing for someone else. And most people would rather be silently miserable next to someone than face that question. There are people who have never spent a single honest hour alone with themselves. They've been in continuous company their entire lives, and they are the most lost people you will ever meet. Solitude is not what happens when nobody loves you. Solitude is what happens when you stop running, when the noise stops and you're left with what was underneath it the whole time. And the reason most people sprint from relationship to relationship, phone to person to substance to screen, the reason stillness feels like a fret is that they have a sense somewhere below the surface of what the stillness would show them, who they are without validation, what they actually think when they're not performing for an audience, whether the life they're living bears any resemblance to what they actually want, or whether it's a sequence of choices made from fear dressed up afterward as preference. And being alone for a sustained period is one of the most psychologically destabilizing things a person can do in a culture that has industrialized distraction. Not because solitude is harmful, but because it is ruthlessly clarifying. It strips the social costume off and leaves the person standing in front of themselves with no buffer. And most people cannot handle what they see. Not because they are bad or broken, but because they have spent years, sometimes decades, building a version of themselves designed for external consumption, designed to be chosen, approved, desired, and they have almost no idea what's underneath it. The solitude doesn't create the emptiness, it reveals the emptiness that was always there, that other people were being used to paper over. And the person who sits with that, who doesn't immediately run toward human noise, who stays in the room with the discomfort until it starts to speak, that person is doing something genuinely rare, something most people will never do. Most of the time, you do not love the person, you love the image you constructed of them. Because in the beginning, you don't know someone. You know an impression, a surface, a carefully managed presentation that the other person is performing as much as you are. And into that impression, you project everything you need. The person who will understand you completely, who will stay, who will choose you consistently, who will make the specific shape of your specific emptiness finally make sense. You fall in love with that projection. You fall in love with your own need wearing a human face. And then coexistence happens. Time happens. The projection can only survive so long before reality dismantles it, before you see who the person actually is, their smallness, their contradictions, their wounds that don't match yours, their needs that conflict with yours, the specific ways they fall short of the imagined version you were actually in love with. And that's when most relationships reveal what they were built on. Some people update. They let the fantasy die and find something real in the person who remains, smaller than imagined, more flawed, but actual. Those relationships are rare, and most people in them don't fully appreciate what they have. But most people grieve the projection. They spend the rest of the relationship trying to recover the feeling from the beginning, which was never about the person, but about the high of having their emptiness temporarily filled. And when the high fades, they call it falling out of love. But what actually happened is simpler and harder. Reality arrived. Passion is almost always projection, and when the projection meets the person, one of them has to die. And most relationships are a slow negotiation about which one it will be. The romantic ideal of monogamy, two people who choose each other completely, exclusively, permanently, across the entire span of their lives as their needs and desires and identities continuously change, is perhaps the most demanding psychological contract ever normalized as default, not as a rare achievement, but as the basic expectation, the minimum, what you're supposed to do. And underneath the performed certainty of most long-term commitments, if you could see the actual architecture, you would find something that looks much less like love and much more like mutual entrapment. People staying together because leaving is terrifying, because they've built an identity around being part of a unit and don't know who they are outside it. Because the financial entanglement is too complex, because the children exist and the children are real, because starting over at a certain age feels like admitting a failure so large it's unbearable, because the devil you know. And they call this commitment. Sometimes it is. Often it is fear in a wedding ring. The body stays present, the mind left years ago. Desire went somewhere, maybe suppressed, maybe redirected, maybe just slowly extinguished under the weight of routine. And the two people continue moving through shared space with shared obligations, sleeping in the same bed, performing a relationship for the children, for the family, for the social audience that expects to see two people who made it, and somewhere in that performance the actual people disappeared. Because human beings change continuously. Their desires change, their needs change. Who they are at 40 is not who they were at 25, and who they'll be at 60 is not who they are now. And monogamy asks permanently temporary creatures to make permanent promises. And the cruelty of it is not that people break those promises. The cruelty is that many people keep them long past the point where keeping them costs them everything. Because many relationships ended years before the official breakup, and what continues afterward is two people maintaining the administrative infrastructure of a love that no longer exists. There are people who have never been single for more than a few months since they were teenagers, relationship to relationship with brief intervals of determined searching that look more like panic than peace. And they would describe themselves as people who love love, but what they are is people who cannot be alone, and the difference matters enormously. Because one of them is a capacity and one is a dependency, and they produce completely different relationships, because the person who cannot be alone brings their entire unexamined interior into every partnership and hands it to the other person to manage. Make me feel okay, reflect back a version of me I can stand, fill the hours so the silence doesn't come, be available, be consistent, be what I need you to be so I don't have to feel what I feel when nobody's here. And this is not a relationship. This is one person using another person as emotional infrastructure. And if the other person is doing the same thing, which they usually are because this is the water people swim in, then what you have is two people using each other as mutual anesthesia, calling it love, and wondering why it doesn't actually fix anything. Because the human void does not disappear when another person enters your life. This is perhaps the most important thing nobody tells you before you spend decades trying to fill an interior emptiness with exterior company. It changes shape. The loneliness becomes a different flavor, no longer the loneliness of being alone, but now the loneliness of being with someone and still feeling it. which is worse because now you've eliminated the obvious explanation. Now you can't tell yourself that the right person will fix it. The right person is next to you and it's still there. And some people discover too late that they were never looking for someone to love. They were looking for someone to make them stop feeling what they feel when they're by themselves. Modern culture has decided that intensity equals depth, that the relationship that consumes you most completely, that makes you most irrational, that costs you the most sleep and the most self-respect, that one is the most meaningful, that passion is proof of love. But the ancients knew better. Epicurus distrusted romantic love specifically because he could see what it did to people. It made intelligent people act directly against themselves. It made someone dismantle their own dignity for attention, accept the occasional scrap of warmth as evidence of being loved, organize their entire emotional life around the unpredictable moods of another person, and call this depth. And jealousy is not deep love. It is the terror of someone who has placed their entire sense of worth in another person's continued choosing them. It is proof that love has become dependency, that the other person has been made responsible for something they were never equipped to carry, your sense of your own value. And emotional dependency is not connection. It is two people locked in mutual need, each one terrified the other will leave, each one managing the relationship primarily to prevent abandonment rather than to build something real. And this is what gets romanticized in songs, in films, in every piece of cultural content that teaches young people what love is supposed to feel like. Intensity, urgency, the feeling that you cannot exist without this specific person. And what that feeling actually describes is someone who hasn't built an interior life robust enough to sustain them on its own. And the relationship built on that feeling is not a partnership, it is an addiction with a face. The greatest advertisement in modern civilization is a very specific image. Two people, a shared home, children, the holidays performed correctly, the social media presence that signals arrival at the destination everyone was told they were supposed to reach. And this image is not primarily about happiness, it is about legibility, about fitting into a framework that makes you predictable, manageable, consuming in the approved patterns, organized around the institutions that keep the structure running. And a single person at peace is a problem for this system. Not a moral problem, but a structural one. Because the single person at peace has discovered something that the entire architecture of romantic advertising needs them to not know. That it is possible to exist whole without being chosen. That your value is not a function of someone else's desire for you. That the life you're living doesn't require external romantic validation to mean something. And once someone truly knows this, not as a performed philosophy but as a lived reality, they become very difficult to manipulate. You cannot sell them inadequacy. You cannot frighten them with the prospect of dying unchosen. You cannot keep them in a relationship that doesn't work by weaponizing their terror of solitude. Because they've sat in the solitude and found it survivable. And the free person is difficult to control. The romantically desperate person is the most controllable person alive. Their decision-making is governed by the need to keep or find a partner, which means it can be predicted, exploited, and monetized in 1,000 different ways. And this is not conspiracy. It is simply the consequence of a culture that has decided your worth is determined by whether someone wants you. And once you accept that premise, you are available to be worked by anyone who controls access to feeling wanted. Because a person who has learned to be alone without suffering has escaped one of the oldest and most effective systems of human control ever built. There is a truth about human consciousness that no relationship has ever been able to dissolve and none ever will. You are alone in there. Fundamentally, structurally, irreducibly alone. Not alone in the sense of unloved, not alone in the sense of unsupported, but alone in the sense that no other consciousness has ever entered yours. No one has ever felt your pain with the exact texture you feel it. No one has ever accessed your deepest thoughts without the distortion of translation. There is a core of your experience that has never been transmitted to another person, not because you haven't tried, but because the transmission is impossible. Language is an approximation. Understanding is always partial, and you have lived your entire life with a self that will never be fully known by anyone else. And this is not a failure of love, it is the structure of consciousness. And the sooner a person faces it honestly, the more mature their relationship with everything else becomes. Because if you know this, if you have actually accepted this rather than just intellectually acknowledged it, then you stop expecting the impossible from other people. You stop punishing them for failing to be the total solution to your fundamental aloneness. You stop mistaking the temporary relief of being known adjacent for the actual resolution of the interior problem. And the people you love will leave. Either they will die first, and you will learn what it means to be left with nothing but the memory of someone who was once a body in a room with you, or you will die first, and the last thing you are aware of will be the gap between your interior and everyone around you, the gap that love warmed but never closed. And there is no version of this story where the ending is different. No relationship is long enough. No love is complete enough. The farewell comes for every single person who has ever loved anyone, and it comes without exception, without mercy, without any concern for whether you were ready. And everyone you love will either die before you or after you. There is no third option. And most people spend their entire lives not thinking about this and call the avoidance happiness. This is not an argument for isolation. It is not a case for emotional withdrawal or performed indifference or the kind of artificial independence people post on the internet while checking their phone every 4 minutes for evidence that someone is thinking about them, because that is not solitude. That is loneliness in a superiority costume. And real solitude is the capacity to sit in a quiet room with no phone, no distraction, no person, no performance, and be okay. Not numb, not performing stoicism, actually okay, actually present with yourself as you actually are without requiring any external input to make that bearable. And this capacity is rare, genuinely statistically rare. Most people have never experienced it for more than a few minutes at a time because the culture they live in has ensured that true silence is always one tap away from being filled. But the person who builds this capacity acquires something that cannot be taken by any relationship ending, any rejection, any loss. They have found the one form of company that is always available and can never abandon them. Not happiness, but something more durable, a ground, a place to come back to, an interior that functions regardless of who is or isn't in the room. And this is not the same as not wanting love. Love can exist alongside this, can be chosen freely from a place of genuine desire rather than terror, can be offered without the desperation of someone who needs the other person to survive emotionally. And that is the only kind of love that is actually freely given. Everything else is transaction, because you cannot genuinely give yourself to someone until you have genuinely found yourself. Everything before that is two people using each other to avoid the same discovery. And perhaps that is the deepest thing. Not that love is false, not that relationships are traps, but that most people never find out what love actually feels like when it comes from someone who is whole. Because whole people are rare, because the culture doesn't produce them, because everything around you is designed to make you feel incomplete, to make you feel that the completion is one relationship away, so that you keep moving, keep searching, keep consuming the content and the products and the partnerships that promise to finally fix what doesn't need fixing. Because you were not born incomplete. You were taught to feel incomplete, systematically from before you could question it. And the person who sits alone long enough to realize that, who feels the discomfort and stays anyway, who hears the silence and doesn't run, that person is doing something almost nobody does. They are meeting themselves for the first time. And that meeting, uncomfortable as it is the beginning of the only freedom that cannot be given by anyone else or taken away by anyone leaving. This channel is maintained by a rare community. Lucid, courageous people who don't shy away from difficult questions. If you feel you belong here, become a channel member. It's the most direct way to keep this project alive, and also gives you access to exclusive content and dialogues. To those who are already members, thank you. You are the backbone of all this. If you want to support in another way, Super Thanks also helps a lot. But just by watching, commenting, or sharing, you are already a part of it. And here, that matters. Thank you very much.